The following presentation is a gift from the team at Streamline Publishing, publishers of Fine Art Connoisseur, Plein Air Magazine, and weekly newsletters Fine Art Today, Realism Today, Plein Air Today, and American Watercolor, and events, the Plein Air Convention and the Figurative Art Convention. We offer over 400 different art instruction tutorials and ultra high-quality video by the world's leading artists. If you like what you see, help us support our artists and our team with your purchase. Each video aired has a special discount code for today only in the comments section with a link to the video offered. And to see everything we do, or if you want to receive notice of new releases, new products, and new events for artists, simply click the other link, which says, "See everything we do." Thank you.
Hello, I'm Eric Rhodes, publisher of Fine Art Connoisseur and Plein Air Magazine. I love traveling. I love going to places and trying things that I've never tried. One of the most difficult subjects ever was painting the Grand Canyon, and that's why I asked Amery Bohling to put together a special video on painting the Grand Canyon for you. I hope you enjoy it.
Hello, thank you for joining me today. I'm going to be painting the Grand Canyon. It is one of my favorite subject matters, and you'll probably find me somewhere on the rim painting or working on it in my studio. I'm going to go through some of the stuff that we'll be touching on as I go and do this painting. I like to start off all of my paintings with a sketch. Some might call it a no-tan, though technically a no-tan is, black and white, and I tend to use a little bit more value. So you can see here, this is my small study I did. The importance of it is just to get an understanding of what I'm painting and to get a good idea of the values. I like to use these types of markers. They're by Prismacolors and they come in varying shades. So I have 20%, 40, 60, 80, and then a black, and it gives me a nice sense of value. So this is a wonderful way to get to know what you're working with. After I do the no-tan, I begin to tone my canvas. I prefer working with a toned canvas because it helps me have a better sense of color. And same thing for working with the gray palette. I will then start by pre-mixing some general masses of color, draw this thing up onto the canvas before or after that. And then I can start painting. And then at the end, we'll go through how I like to finish a painting by writing out some simple things I can do to fix it, and as I run out of ideas I might start saying it's time to wrap things up, but we will go into that as the moment comes. Before we get started, I'm going to have an image on the screen that we're going to be working from. Please feel free to take time to take a photo of it, do a screenshot, however you can to get it off of this screen and into something tangible so that you can use it and paint along with me. It's a really good way to kind of bring home what I'm trying to teach you. I want you to do more than just watch. I want you to participate, and I think we can do a lot more. So let's get started and begin with toning the canvas and bringing some sketching on. All right, so we're going to start by toning the canvas. I'm going to be using this Utrecht raw umber. Burnt umber also works very well. It's an acrylic, so the benefit is that it dries fast, so I can get started painting and I don't really have that underpainting affecting my colors if I had used like an oil paint as an underpainting. I might do that every now and then if I'm painting outside, but it depends on my mood, I guess. So for this one, we're going to be using the acrylic. So I just kind of swirl it on. It's nothing fancy. The next step I'm going to do is I'm going to take my paper towel, no-tan, and I'm gonna get it a little wet. And then you just kind of smear it around. It's pretty basic. This is just going to make it a little bit easier. I don't want, as you can see, this is also an oil primed canvas, so the acrylic will adhere a little bit differently. Not a good way to know. I like working with acrylic primed canvases. Oil primes are also great. They just offer a kind of a different type of look. The main difference is like the paint will move around easier on an oil prime than on a acrylic prime or a universal prime. You'll notice that it holds in, it soaks in, and it absorbs. So it really is good to know what you kind of like to work with. So try both out and see what is good for you. Okay, so at this point, it's going to be drying a little bit. I've got the painting here. As you can see, I have a little bit of these lines on it. I kind of like starting with a grid. It helps me make sure I get everything placed correctly on the canvas, and I'm not like, I have a penchant. I don't really want this to be somewhere in the middle when I want it up here. So I do a lot of planning in the beginning to kind of get things laid out the way I want them to. And I do believe that the more pre-work you do or prep work you do will make your painting more successful. So, all right, let's get started. I'm gonna let this dry for a bit and then we can start doing the lines on this version and put the sketch up. Okay, so what we're gonna do now is start by gridding the canvas I'm working on and doing a sketch. I keep my paint really thin when I do this. I'm not trying to make it so thick that as I paint over it, it's going to pick up that color and affect the stuff I'm working on. So you can see I'm using a lot of turp. I'm using some very neutral colors. It's probably like my Rembrandt cold gray. Sometimes I might use a little bit of this transparent brown oxide. So you can see it's pretty thin, which is great. And as I do this, I use my brush as kind of a way to measure and find that center. See what it is here, and I'll kind of go like this. Let's see. This goes here. It's a little bit more like this there. That might be more the center of the canvas. Oh, let me see there. There we go. Right in there. Once I got that, I can repeat it on the other side. Okay. And then we can just connect the dots. This doesn't have to be perfect because we're working on a smaller canvas. I just want to double check this. That's good. All right, it's a little trickier because half of this canvas is under here, so I have to mind it. All right, let's see if we can get this nice and centered. Now I'm going to be working on two little things, so I'm going to use just this as a guide point. So we have one in here. All right, good. Yeah, that's the one I want. Okay, over here, just copying it. Okay, connect these. There we go. I'm just going to borrow this measurement I took here, repeat it down here. Again, the paint is nice and thin. These lines do not have to be perfectly straight. Sketchy is fine. We're all going to paint over this. And I'm going to do some lines in the middle. These are a little bit easier to see because that one that will be tricky because it's hidden. Okay, right about there. Of course, if you're ever using an easel similar to mine, when you are wrapped up, you will want to make time to paint the lower parts that are hidden in here. Forget about them. All right. Actually, it kind of also gives you an idea of where the frame will be. You're always going to want to kind of have an idea that this is going to be cut off once you frame them. Right about here, we're going to have our center. Just going to double check that. It seems like it's somewhere in here. Okay. That's good. All right. Make another line of note. Put one down here. A little bit longer, so I want to have a little more reference points. Okay. Good. And then we're going to have these guys. I put a little bit of check marks in here. You can do it many different ways. You know, I know this is probably not the most exciting part of painting, but on the bright side, if you are painting outside and you do one of these little no-tan sketches here, You can grid those up and do the same thing on your painting. Try to get the size of the sketch similar to the size you were working on, or pick a canvas that fits. And then you got this wonderful time to spend drawing lines on your canvas. So if anyone were to approach you that you were nervous about seeing, they would be easily bored and walk away. This is not the fun part. Very handy. Ah, look at that. Okay, so now we got our lines up there. We can start adding in the drawing. So here we're going to kind of start. I tend to work top to bottom, left to right. I had a student for a while who worked with pastels that I was teaching, and she liked to do things that way for, reasons that as it was vertical, that she didn't want the pastels sprinkling on her hand. But I found I kind of liked that technique and used it in oil painting. Just trying to get this here. Okay. So that's probably why I do things the way I do things. A couple years from now, I may completely change things and do it a bit differently. I think that's part of the fun. And as I do videos or teach, I always try to go through whatever it is I'm currently using technique-wise. So I guess it keeps it as an adventure. I mean, it'll always be a little bit different. Another reason I like working this way, and I will probably do the same as I start painting, is that my own natural tendency is to, if I were to block it in too simply, especially if it's a larger piece of art, I'm a little more forgiving on myself when they're plein airs or studies. But when it's big and I know I'm going to be spending 2 to 3 weeks on it, when I get that thing blocked in, I feel like I finished that painting. And a part of me is like, just kind of loses interest a bit. And I think by leaving these gaping holes as I work, it holds my interest and I follow through. And that is me just working with my own handicaps. Feel free to find out what works for you and what doesn't. Don't let someone make you feel bad about how you like to approach a painting. It should be individual for every person, and if it gives you a good end result, then, use it. Here we go. Here's the canyon is also it's very vertical. I mean, not vertical, it's very linear horizontally, because you're going to see all these kind of striations going left to right. This is easy to get lost in. So, there's one massive one here, and then here's one here. There are going to be times when I'm probably working on this and I'm going to lose my place. And if you feel like that happened, just take a moment, gather your senses about, put it back together. It's normal. Everything's normal. And even as the canyon can be intimidating to paint. It can also be lovely because we don't really have these ideas that say canyon should look like this. So we don't have that to fight with like we do with when we paint trees or other things. It's like a clean slate. This line comes right about here, so close to that. This is kind of where it breaks, comes up, and then this part here, where the rock juts out and makes a shadow. This crosses here, and then you can see it kind of going here. And I'm just making some shadow notes, so again, the brush is thin enough, so I'm not too worried about this affecting my painting later. But it will make it a lot easier to note where things are laying in the painting. I don't want to lose my place. Especially with the canyon, there's a lot of stuff going on here. It is easy to get lost. For me, I enjoy the challenge of it. Just give yourself the time to find things. And sometimes, here's another trick I like to do. So I don't mix up, these walls with the more vertical planes. I might put these little lines on it so I know what it is I'm working on. It's like this is kind of where the plane goes this way. And it just sometimes makes it easier for me to know later on like what it was that I was drawing, because again, you are kind of trying not to get lost in all that's going on. Another thing, in case you're interested, This is a painting from the North Rim. It is the first canyon location that I actually painted. This scene, in case you ever happen to visit and want to paint, is my idea of what very cushy painting is. So you can see this on the deck of their hotel, the lodge, and you can go out there. You can have a waiter bring you some Arizona sunrise or some wine. You can set up your painting. There's some nice shady spots, and the view is amazing. You can just paint right in front of you, to the left, to the right. And the people who are actually, you know, visiting the North Rim are just a different breed. They're very quiet, they're very respectful, they'll be interested. It's a great place to paint. Okay, so here we're gonna have another shadow mass just below this line. This is interesting because so here we have this big piece. It starts turning here. There's a shadow here. And then right here on this axis. Sometimes I'll use my hand just so I can get an idea of where I am. Again, you're constantly trying just not to get lost. So this actually gets smaller. And here, just below this line. And right here, we have the shadow. Getting, again, this stuff that I do beforehand in is going to make the process later go so much faster. So doing this tedious stuff will make it faster later. So bear with me. Here. Okay, so this is this kind of, got it? Here we go. This is this guy. Marking it. There's this little line in here. Okay, and then this is going to be interrupted by this mass coming up. So more information about the North Rim, that is fun. It is a higher elevation than the South Rim, so it gets a little more snow, a little colder, and it's also only open for a limited amount of months a year, just for the summer. Once it gets its first snow, it's closed because they don't have anyone clearing the roads for you. So some people will snowshoe in or snowmobile in. Some people will hike up from the bottom just to see what it looks like in the winter. Also, in my opinion, I think it's actually true, is that a lot of the features of the Grand Canyon are a little bit closer, like, you know, your Isis and your Brahma and Zoroaster temples are located a little closer to the North Rim, so you're going to get, the colors are going to be a little more intense, you're going to see them more up close. Like this is much further away on the South Rim, which is probably right over here. So it's a different look, and that's great. You can go to each rim and expect something new to paint. I'm going to break that a little lower here, a little sooner. This curves around. Also understanding, like as you paint, try to figure out what's going on geologically with your subject. Like notice that this mass is behind it. It breaks here. Why? There's a crack that comes here. This is kind of a separate situation. Again, because I'm painting from an image and not necessarily from life, we do sometimes lose a little bit of that 3D ability of being able to separate, like this mass is breaking away from this mass behind. So as I start adding color, I will have to be mindful of that so that they stay separate and not merge together unnecessarily. This is going to curve around here like that. Again, noting these shadows help. Goes way up here, or way out there. Down. Okay, here we have this shadow, some shadow. Again, keeping these in is going to make it a lot easier to know where I am working later. So this is where we get these foothills here. Palisades, maybe. This view is a little bit trickier, I think, for me, just because of all these different striations that kind of go down. I also paint a lot of ISIS, so I have that very well committed to memory. And I think there is something helpful about painting that the more often you do it and the more you paint your subject matter, you kind of have part of it memorized, which is really great if you're ever out painting in plein air. If you painted a subject numerous times, you build up a great base memory of what it looks like in different lighting conditions and what kind of colors you like to use to work with it, and it can make the process a lot quicker. So becoming familiar with a subject is a great thing, so don't ever feel like you can't paint something more than once. And this is something, I painted a lot of them in the past, and it's nice to revisit. But yeah, I think because it's been a while, it is, you know, a process of painting. I have to pay more attention, be a little more cautious of the brush strokes I use and drawing. The colors are similar. I mean, a little stronger, but it harkens to, you know, the South Rim, the sediments and the Kaibab. Like you have the Kaibab limestone and the different reds of these rocks, the violets. I think that's a big thing that I'm attracted to, is just the colors. It's unusual. You get blues and reds and greens. There is greens in these. There are trees and bushes that kind of cover these hills. And so North Rim, on some of the features, you'll see some pine at the very tops. Not in this particular view. But people are always surprised if they come to the gallery and they see I put green into it, and they're confused because they don't expect it to be there, but it is, especially if it's a rainy season. Okay, just putting again some of these things. I like how this kind of curves around, get that curve. All right, so this little mass up here in the foreground starts really low. Okay, here, and then there's a break right about there. Again, feel free to use that finger to mark your point so you know where you are. Shadow here. These kind of rocks I think are fun. These are that soft limestone type rock. And they just catch all sorts of colors, kind of like white does. You know, it can reflect warms and blues. And lighting at this time of day will make, because I can say, all right, the light is coming from, I'm not getting as much information in this as I would like because I'm not there in person. But I know the light is coming from this angle, causing a little bit of shadowing, but not too much on this. But I will be making a point to have this catch more light than this side that turns here or on the top, where it's also receiving less light than the one that is directly facing that sun. So knowing your light source is crucial. Ah, look, see? Look how actually much further this goes out. I'm going to fix that here. Okay. There, here, this is that part that faces the sun some more. And this comes here, and I'm just going to note, see how it ends up here. Notice these angles. Not everything is just completely left to right even, like this angle's down a little bit. This angle's up. The shadow comes here. Goes here like that. All right. This I also like including in because I think it'll brighten things up a bit. Just adding that pop of foreground. I like in my paintings to have foreground, middle ground, background. It's kind of like my thing, so I do seek that out. I also tend to like working on sunny days as opposed to gray days. Especially in the canyon, it can really get flat if you don't have, you know, some contrast going. Sunset, sunrise, also good times to paint it. There's a lot of these bushes here, sorry to be on a tangent, that are kind of like coming up in the middle. I think, you know, a good rule of thumb to go by is just because it's there doesn't mean you have to paint it. So if it's not going to make the painting look good, I'm not going to include it. I kind of feel like these trees are more distracting and causing a tension point at the bottom of the canvas. So I'm not going to include him. I'm not sure about this guy yet because I feel like he's getting cut off in a weird way. I like him. I think I have to be careful about his placement because I don't want it to be perfectly lined up with this guy, and I don't want them to all be the same shape. So that's something I'm going to have to make decisions on as I go. Do I want him bigger? How do I do it? Because you want to keep things interesting and different. Like too much ditto, ditto, ditto is going to in itself be a distraction and take away from whatever part of your painting you really want the viewer to look at. So this is going to be something to sort out. So let's see, what's a good play? Because I like these two guys up there. I think they're important. And if I were to make this bush the exact same size right here, that would not be very fun. This guy's little, so he's just a little off to the side, so that works. And same with him. I'm kind of just making some decisions. Let's see on my sketch I put it here. I might just give it a more of a longer shape. There we go. So I kind of edited the shape. Bushes are easy enough to kind of futz around with. There are certain things I don't really make too much up of because I'd probably make it look worse. But bushes are basic, right? Easy stuff. Painting the canyon is easy. Okay, got that little thing here. And we're kind of wrapping up this drawing pretty good. Now, in the background, there's a lot going on here. I kind of like to play around a bit with these horizon lines. I'm going to make it a little bit shorter. Another thing I can do, there's all this stuff going on in the background. Depending on how the painting is looking, I may or may not include all this background, because sometimes I think it can be a little distracting. So I might put some of it in. This guy I think is interesting. And then I'll probably put him here and him. And I think a little bit, actually I'm going to, what I'll probably also do is keep the values very close back there so they don't jump. I don't want them to compete with this foreground information. So I think I give myself a little more liberty in designing what goes on behind things. And as I paint, you also want to make sure you note that this color back here is a different kind of blue than this color up here. We need to make sure this one in the background is kept a cooler, lighter blue because the atmosphere is washing it out, and this one we need to make a little more intense. Now we're going to start mixing some of these colors up. I'm going to start with maybe this blue and back. So I got some titanium white. I have some blue here. Okay. Nice color. Now this is very light. We need to add a little bit more dark to it. Okay. Holding that up. I mean, I'm not, you want to be careful trying to color match something to this. There are times when having a sketch is a lot easier to use. So there are some situations you might find yourself plein air painting, and I know that happens to me a lot. I will work on a subject, and when I get back home, it's not necessarily painting I want to blow up in a studio, but I still think that when you go paint on location, like, you can still use similar color studies to apply to other paintings. So one thing that I thought would be interesting in this painting is kind of doing something like that, because it is a problem I have in my studio a lot, because sometimes on location what I think would look good as a smaller painting is not really what I want to do larger in the studio. So I can't imagine someone who hasn't had the same situation. So mixing this color, I think I'm going to bring out a study I have from a previous trip. All right, so this is a study I did a while back in the Grand Canyon. It's kind of a similar time of day and has a similar color palette, but I know I'm going to have to be a little more open-minded about using colors I did from this study, but it will give me a better idea than this sketch will, a better idea than this photo is going to for, getting a good sense of the color. And I want to make sure I mix something that's going to look attractive, and I think the color play in here is going to translate really well. So I'm just going to place this guy right here, and he's going to be my tool. Now, one thing noticing with this is I'm not going to have this light blue in the background, but I will have some of the dark blue ideas and some of these striations. I'm going to use that a bit, and that's going to help me build a color. So I was mixing this blue and realizing that I needed more information than just this, because again, the big problem with working from photographs alone is that they just don't have the color knowledge we need. They can only give us so much. We can get the drawing, we can get an idea of where the values are, but there's a limitation. Something that you can only get by just being there and observing. So I'm going to mix myself up a nice dark color too. And that's going to help make this color easier to figure out. It's all about kind of balancing things out. Now, another thing that makes me interested in pre-mixing my colors is that I'm able to kind of balance out something very important, which is your shadows and your lights. You want to try and do the best to keep them separate. Shadows be in the shadows, lights be in the lights. Then you don't want them to cross, because if you do, you're going to end up with a flat painting. It can be a little tricky when it comes to something like limestone in the shadow and limestone in the light, because we want to keep that this is in the light and this is in the light and this is in the shadow. If I were to make these darker than that shadow, it's going to fall flat. Or if I made this shadow lighter than this, we wouldn't read it as a shadow. So it'll be more obvious when we work in these kind of areas. I need to make this blue background a darker value than these dark reds and greens in the light, because those are in the light, not in the shadow. So pre-mixing it on the palette allows me to kind of judge where they are on the value scale here before I put them up on my canvas. Okay, and I'm mixing this color. I'm going to add a little bit of this permanent red medium to it. It's going to tone it down, gray it up, violet it up. I'm using this instead of the quinacridone rose, and that is because this is a cooler red and it will get a little bit too electric violet. And I like my blues to be a little more muted in the canyon. Again, I'm trying to keep the value up. I know this is a shadow. So what I'm going to do is, because I have this little study with me, I'm just going to take a small brush. Sometimes I will use my palette knife. I'm going to take a little bit of a sample and just see how it's comparing to the color I have here. So I'm able to put a little swatch here. It's a little bit of a cooler blue. I can probably warm it up. I might like it being a little bit more of a brighter blue because it's not a particularly stormy day. So I'm going to add some more red here. All I'm using right now is ultramarine blue, permanent red medium by Rembrandt, and then some cold gray by Rembrandt. In case any of you are interested in working with similar colors or what kind of palette I use, for this painting, I have my basics up. So the colors I can't do without are going to be these four. Titanium white, and I'm not too picky about what brand of titanium white I use. This one here is by Utrecht. Cad yellow lemon, it is by Utrecht. Permanent red medium by Rembrandt. And this is ultramarine blue. I prefer ultramarine blue over French ultramarine because French tends to have a little bit of a red undertone. Now on the side, these colors I'm less critical about, but they tend to be out. It's going to be this Cad yellow medium or orange yellow. It's just kind of a warmer, orangier tone, but leaning more towards the yellow side. This is quinacridone rose. This is alizarin crimson. This is phthalo green by Sennelier. This is some Cad yellow green. I like that just for toning. You'll see me use it a little bit later. This is the cold gray by Rembrandt, and this is transparent iron oxide red. This here is just some mud I've used from a previous palette, just scraped off and set aside because it made a nice gray. Over here I have a few bit of pre-mixed colors I did at home in a studio with a lighting I am more familiar with, just so I can make sure I'm getting everything up to speed. All right, so you're seeing me mix this. Let's see how that's working. A little blue. Now, if I add a little bit of green to this, it can also help gray this violet up. Well, it's more like a blue violet. Too much green, it'll turn green just a little bit. Just take some of that edge off. And again, I don't know if you've painted with me before, but something I like to do is start with my values not being too extreme. I don't want it to be super dark, super light, too blue, too red, because that gives me room later on to push and pull add those highlights. I do take my time mixing colors. I'm not trying to rush through this. Again, if you are a new plein air painter, this is a great way to kind of, you know, paint outside. No one's really going to bother you because you haven't put anything on your canvas yet. All right, let's see how this is working out. Again, I'm okay with it being a little bit more colorful than what I have. See how that compares to what I brought it from home. I think I'm going to make it a little, add a little bit of green to this. That's that phthalo. Be very careful with it. It can be pretty kooky and strong. I'm liking this one by Sennelier because it's not as polluting as some of the other greens I've worked from. All right. A little more of that. I'm getting kind of a nice blue. I'm kind of liking this one, so I'm going to set this aside. He is in the shadow. So I need to know none of my lights have to be, or should be, darker than this. It needs to be lighter. Okay. I'm going to now go into mixing some of this lighter blue. Now it can be a little bit cleaner than that one. I need to be mindful to make it dark enough so that these lights in the foregrounds can read as lights and not as a shadow. So again, another good reason I can compare and judge these on the palette. It also helps that I'm trying to mix this on a gray palette. I think working on a white palette is kind of a handicap because what we're really trying to do is mix colors that are going to work on a completed painting. I'm not trying to mix and judge a color on a white canvas because it won't look that way when it's done. All the colors I'm mixing on my canvas, if I were to strip them off the painting and put them into a pile here, it would turn out gray like this palette. So I'm judging my colors based off of what a finished painting will be. Okay, here we go. Just add a little bit of green to soften it up. I'm going to check this. Kind of seeing how it might look. This color is going to take a little bit more thought to get correct. I think my plan is just to kind of mix it, set it aside, and then edit it as I get some of these lights mixed up. Because I'm going to have to make that a bit darker because I want to get these foreground colors here in the light strong and saturated because otherwise we end up with a very washed out painting. So, all right, so I'm going to start mixing some of this red wall. I believe they're the super group. I should know my canyon better. I will go there and I'll try to study, you know, which layers are which, and then by the time I get home, it's just a jumble. All right, I'll get there. So I'm getting this really nice and saturated. This is my permanent red medium and my cad yellow lemon, which I think make just great fiery colors. The perm red is a wonderful red because it doesn't really lend itself too much to being super cool. It's not as hot as a cad red light, so I think it gives you a lot of flexibility. So if you were going to work in just a primary palette, your cad yellow lemon, perm red medium, and your ultramarine blue, excellent. It will not let you down. All right, so I'm kind of checking that here to see how it is. Move that over so you can see it better. How it's blending in with that. It's a little too pink, a little too washed out. I want to add more saturation. I'm going to grab some of this orange or red because I'm okay with it being a bit darker. Grab some of this. I'm going to add some of this cool red in here and see what it does. That's pretty. Again, I'm spending plenty of time just really getting these colors the way I like them. I'm trying to see how it works on here. I'm also seeing how it works on here and reacts with these guys. So it's kind of like I'm making decisions based off of two source materials and then my reference. It's a combination, so I don't know, maybe this is an advanced painting. Don't know. All right. You know, I kind of like how these are working together. I'm really looking like there's a wonderful like complementary color bouncing going on. Might just set this aside. One of the colors I mixed up at home was this. So it's a lot darker than this guy. Not sure. that one I would have used some perm red, a little cad yellow lemon, a little bit of this green to kind of get that, the green tones that red down a bit without turning it a completely different color. I might add this a little bit into here just to give it, I don't know if that light might be a little too intense, so I can't add highlights later. All right, let's call that guy good. Again, none of this pre-mixing means I cannot go back and edit these colors. Okay, so this blue, now I'm looking at this blue and I have to make sure it is darker than this. So you can kind of put them up next to each other and see like, okay, how are these reading? I feel like they're almost the same value, which means this guy needs to be darker or this guy needs to be lighter. I'm hesitant to make this one lighter because I don't want to lose the saturation. If you make things too light, you kind of lose the color. So, you know, you kind of have to be mindful of that stuff. The solution isn't always just adding white to things or black. And if you use black on your palette, make sure you use it as a color and not as a way to edit your values. I add a little bit of that transparent just to kind of keep it grayed down. More blue. All right, let's see how this works. They're going to be very close together. It's just a hair past that light. So let's go ahead and keep this as it is for now. I might edit it as I start putting things up on the canvas, but it's something to be aware of. Painting is absolutely a thinking man's game. All right, so the next color, the hardest color I think to get is going to be this in the background. What I want to be very aware of, it's very similar to these. Actually might even be the same, similar features on different sides. What I want to be mindful of is this is a very similar substance to this, but I want to make sure this is not as bright and not as intense as this guy, or it's going to fight. This is going to easily come forward if I paint it the same way. So I'm going to be making a color for here that'll be a little bit darker, a little bit less intense so that this comes forward. So I think because it's going to be tricky, I'm going to start working on some of these green areas here, and then I might mix this color and then come to him. So I will use that information to help me judge that color. So really what I'm doing here is just kind of thinking out loud. Okay, so I'm going to mix that green. Now the green, these planes in the green are very similar in value as it is to the red. So you want to make it close. Depending on where the light is hitting, it may be darker or lighter. I think in this particular situation, the sun is lighting up these more than they are on these foothills. So I'm going to probably make my green a little bit darker than that, which again might edit how I change these values. So the first step I do is I'm kind of using two very simple colors, my blue and my yellow, kind of just getting the value where I want it to be. Hair darker than that guy, but still pretty close. At the moment, it is extremely green. So if I were to put this up on the canvas, it would look weird. So now that we have this kind of at the value I want, I'm going to kill the green. So the opposite of green is red. You can just think of Christmas right there. You want to be very careful how much of this red you add into it. So I'm just going to add a little bit. I can always add more. It's a lot harder to take away. I'm not looking to just bulk through all sorts of paint. There, so you can see it's really just kind of settling that green down. I'm going to add a little bit of this warmth to it. You know, I've also found that when it comes to painting the canyon, getting these colors similar helps, because otherwise they can be a little jumpy because they are both inclined to kind of be opposites, the red and the green. So giving them a link of warmth makes a difference. Again, I'm just kind of adding the reds and the yellows, warming this up. A little bit of this here. A little bit of the light. Okay. It's always interesting too, I think because of it, as we start judging these colors based on our palette, you might find that you're not really making much of anything green, but up on here, when it reacts with the red, it turns very green. Let's see how this looks up on this guy. Because this painting here is dry, I can always wipe it off later. Make sure your brush is clean. See, it's a really pretty dark. I mean, it is darker in this version than this, but the tone is looking good. I might gray it up a little bit more. I'll steal some of this guy. Let's see. I'm also trying to see, how does it react with this orange? I'm not quite feeling it yet. So I do a lot of like, you know, how do these guys work with each other? Do I like it and do I not like it? How can I edit it? We are really kind of, as we mix this, pre-painting without throwing it up on the canvas and realizing it was a bad idea. I'm figuring that all out right now. So that when it gets time to painting, a lot of this like hard work is kind of done. I'm going to steal some of this, see if that edits it. Give it that similar feeling. Yeah. Lighten that up a bit. Just a little bit of weight. Be careful with that titanium. It can kill a color. So the color I came up with at home was something more like this. It had a lot more red in it. I can decide if I like it more. To do that, I would have just added more of this yellow lemon. You can see how it does. Sometimes this is also great to kind of heat things up a bit. So maybe I'll find a compromise and just kind of do something like that. There we go. To steal him. Yeah, these guys are fun for green, those transparent iron oxides. They're a transparent color as opposed to an opaque color. Opaques are going to be, you know, most things that include cadmium in the name and your titanium white. So they're very opaque and saturated. It can slaughter another color. If you were to mix a titanium white with a transparent color, it would probably easily overcome the transparent color, as opposed to if you use titanium with an opaque. In case you are into using transparency, you can use a flake white. It's not as opaque as titanium, so if you mix it with your iron oxide red, you'd probably see a lot more of that iron oxide showing up. But I am a titanium girl, so that's what I use. All right, so we're getting some of these colors down. I'm going to work on, actually I think I'm gonna cut that shadow here. Now there is, I can appreciate that there's reds going on, so I'll probably tint this a bit. I think I can make this a little bit warmer now. As I get more of these colors up, I can edit them as I go. I'm really just looking for them to be exciting. That's funner. Look at that, that's better. A little bit of this to kind of warm it. It's a great warming color. All right. Darken this up some more, I believe. Again, just balancing it up. Thank you for bearing with me. This is not the exciting part of the video. It's super important, but yeah. Getting a little bit darker. Some iron oxide red, perm red. Don't try to worry about painting or mixing quickly. I mean, it's a skill, it's a habit. The more you do it, the quicker you'll be. Take as much time as you need. Don't ever feel like you have to rush through anything, especially since we're doing studio work. That's one of the best things about it. Okay, so I'm going to, I think I'm going to work on both of these guys at the same time. So I'm going to start off with my white. This is the trick for me. I mean, you might find it to be different, is one of the more trickier colors to get. Is these distant limestone, because if I make them too bright, they jump out and they just look nutty. Okay, so this is right now this warm yellow color and then some of this gray to kind of get it a nice flat. I'm going to add some red to it. Again, I just need this to be lighter than that, but I don't want it to be lighter than the foreground. Some of that green. It's looking good. See, it's not too jumpy. It's going to settle. And I can add a little like pop of light towards the end of the painting to bring out parts. A little bit of yellow here. Warm it up. A little bit more. Again, you'll see me pull colors a certain way. I like to use this kind of an angled palette knife because I've just been working with it for so long and I'm extremely comfortable with it. I like how I can kind of come on, scrape up the paint very tightly, and then squish it off and I get a good mix. As I pull paint to mix in, you won't see me scoop like that. I find that if I come in, attack it like this, or if I see students do it, they end up with way too much paint on their knife. I like to press it in. So you'll see me take this side, press it into the paint, and that way I can pull a much smaller amount. You can always add more again, it's harder to remove. Okay. And sometimes there's just a point, you mixed it so wrong, you just have to set it aside because the amount of paint you might have to mix in to fix it is just ridiculous and you're just being wasteful. All right, that's looking like a nice color there. I don't think it's going to, actually it looks pretty similar to what I have in my helper study. Look at that, no, it's pretty good. There's a little bit of green there, so I'm going to see if I can get a cleaner test. That's great. I kind of like the rose in that a little bit more, so I might add some red to it. A little bit more red. Again, I'm making sure I don't get too much on this because a little is going to go a long way, and I just want it to blush a bit, not turn a completely different color. There we go. Okay. Get all that good stuff here. Knowing this color is going to be a big help in mixing that foreground color. And I'll probably have to go back to that. So I want to make sure they are not the same. So when it comes to mixing something for this big mass, again, there's a lot of stuff going on. There's a shadow here. It's turning colors here to here. I'm not going to try and get every little note when I make my puddle. I'm really just going to go for something general that can represent the light area. So I want to be careful to mix something that's not going to be super committed as the brightest bright or the darkest dark. So in this painting, this is the lightest object in here. The darkest dark is probably going to be, well, if I were painting, it would be these trees, but it can also be the shadow in here. All right, so I'm starting off with that cad yellow medium. It's a nice saturated color. A little bit of red. I want to make sure, I'm going to make this color a little bit cleaner. I want to make sure it's brighter than that, again, because I want it to come forward and not get into the back. They have to be different. Might be a little you know, another good thing is like noting what these things look like on here is going to be, it's like if I were to come and put this on my napkin, you can see it's not as white, but I could make it a little darker. Again, getting it enough pigment in it is going to allow me to keep it saturated and add highlights later. I don't want to remove the option of adding shadows and lights by making it one giant light. Okay. That's getting good. It's kind of more interesting. I don't know if I'm using proper grammar in this video, so you'll have to forgive me. All right. So now I feel like these two are still a little too close, so I'm going to muddy this up a bit by stealing from these guys. Let's get that grayer. I mean, it looks pretty muddy right here, and I know in our mind's eye we see white rock, and it's very tempting just to paint white rock, but you've got to see past the local color of what you're painting and really get into understanding the affected color. I mean, it's very rare in life. You know, your green tree is going to be painted the same color. You might color match the leaf with the green tree. You have to paint how it is affected by the light bouncing off its nearby objects, the time of day, the atmosphere in the sky. And so I think a big hang up that, you know, artists might see, or a new artist, is that we really want to paint that local color. So the local color of these white rock, you've got to put that out of your head and you've got to paint the affected color. Atmosphere is happening, distance is happening, all sorts of shadows and lights are breaking it up and making it look different. So we want to be mindful of that. I'm just going to wipe this up so I have some clean surface to work on. We're starting to get some of these colors going off, and I'm able to kind of judge what's happening. I also like to kind of keep things clean so my colors are clean. So I'm going to check how these are going. So my shadows are right now over here. This is my green in the light, but it's fighting with that, so I might edit this a bit. It's really about finding a nice balance. I'm adding some white and some yellow. The yellow kind of keeps the white from killing it too much. Don't want it to be super gray. There, it's starting to brighten up a bit. I understand that these two colors are very close on the spectrum. Because what it's a shadow in this blue, but there's atmosphere kind of paling it up, and it's catching light, and it does brighten it up a little bit more than it would be when the parts of it that are closer to us is darker purple. But if I make this darker than this, or if it doesn't read as that on the canvas, it's going to, again, flatten everything out. All right, so I'm going to see what else I want to mix up here. I might work up a little warm tone so that I can add it to certain things as I go. It's not necessarily, it's probably going to be more so to use to tint the shadows with when I get into the reds. Maybe warm this up when it's in there. Just kind of a handy color. You're probably not going to find me pulling out like a whole bunch of rainbow of colors, because in the end I probably just mix them up myself. A little darker. Okay. There we go. It's kind of playing well with the other colors here. I might also grab a little bit of a darker blue here just because I could find it handy, something to work with these shadows. This is the one I mixed before. It's basically, again, ultramarine blue, cold gray, some permanent red. Cold gray. I really like cold gray. It's very handy. All right. Neutralize it a bit. There we go. Again, I can always add those bright blues and stuff later, but they will not show up if everything is bright blue and bright red. I kind of want to make this a little richer. I want more red in here. All right. Now, I'm going to throw in a fun color, that are going to probably be like the highlights of these reds, just to see how it works with what I have. A little bit of that. There's a little bit of mud in that yellow, so I'm going to be apprehensive about that. This color, I really want it to be clean, bright, fun, saturated. And again, if I make everything of these too light, I can't get the saturation in this color. So give yourself enough budget by making things dark enough. I mean, not black, but dark enough so that you can make colors intense. That's kind of fun. All right, we'll put him over here. Okay, I'm kind of liking where this is going. There's going to be some of this in the back. I'm debating if I want to pre-mix that or not, because I might want to judge it later. It's probably going to be a muddied version of this. Might just throw some of that up there just in case. I'm going to want to keep this value very tight with this one, because otherwise, again, that contrast is going to bring it forward too much. See, it just needs to be a little lighter. That might work. Okay, maybe a touch of pink. Atmosphere is just making this a different kind of color. You know, you'll see people wanting to kind of simplify things and say, well, the color I mixed for this foreground and the color I mixed for here, we can just use it all for the same thing, and this can all be the same. And then you just, yeah, you get a flat painting, and we're not really quite sure as a viewer what's coming forward and what's going backwards. So as I paint, this would be the time I take the next pause. Even if I'm outside, I might do this too. I mean, depending on what's going on with the environment, sometimes your light is moving so fast you don't get to take all the breaks you want. But it's a good pause, or even if it's just a mental pause when I know, okay, close this stage. I did my study, I put the lines up, I put the drawing up, I've mixed my colors. Now I get to move on to, the fun part, which is going to be putting the paint on the canvas.
For generations, the great painters have known that there are certain subject matter which really show off their skills as a painter. Some subjects are so complex and complicated, yet when people see paintings of these subjects, they realize just how good these painters really are. One of the most complex and hard-to-paint subjects is the Grand Canyon, with its vast expanse, its subtle color shifts, and complex geology. Artists throughout history have made the pilgrimage to the Grand Canyon, the master of all landscape subjects, knowing it's an important subject to prove their ability as a painter. Now you can make the pilgrimage in your own home, so you can discover exactly how to take a complex subject like the Grand Canyon and simplify it to create the effective complexity without having to suffer over every little detail. Arizona-based artist Amery Bohling has spent years studying and painting the Grand Canyon and has produced some amazing paintings of the canyon, which are highly sought after by her collectors. Now, she reveals what she has learned from months of study over years of painting the canyon.
I just finished shooting a new instructional video about painting the Grand Canyon. And in it, we're going to go over a lot of stuff that I think is going to help you learn as an artist. We do no-tans, we're going to go through sketches like this guy. This is going to be your main tool, along with a good reference material. I'm going to go through the brushes I use, the paints I use, how I mix things, how I sketch things, and how to know when to finish your paintings. That's always a big question. I really hope you get a chance to check it out. I think you're going to learn a lot.
This is a must for every painter, offering you skills which apply to all landscape painting, but especially to mountains, rocks, and distant vistas. Over 4 hours of top-tier instruction, which you can paint along with at your own pace. This is a must-have video for the library of any artist who wants to paint amazing mountain landscapes. How to Paint the Grand Canyon with Amery Bohling, now available on DVD and streaming video. Order yours today.
There are only 2 or 3 people who are great at painting the Grand Canyon, whose paintings are everywhere. Amery Bohling is one of those special people. I hope you enjoyed that video. You can learn more about it at lilyartvideo.com. Remember, there's a special discount on the full video in the comments section. Now, let's get to know Amery a little bit. Hey everybody, I'm Eric Rhodes from Fine Art Connoisseur and Plein Air Magazine, and today we have a very special artist with us, Amery Bohling. Welcome.
Thank you. It's exciting to be here.
Yeah, we're glad you're here. So this is kind of cool for you because your career is just soaring. You've really become popular, and it looks like you're probably selling a lot of paintings.
I've been very lucky so far, so I hope it continues.
Yeah, I tend to think that people who are lucky make their own luck.
True.
What do you think?
No, there's work that goes behind it. It's definitely not, just sitting around and crossing your fingers that good things will come your way. You have to kind of go out and get it yourself. So
I sense from talking to you off camera that you're a bit entrepreneurial.
Well, both my mom and dad were entrepreneurs, so they both started their own company and did very well, and then they sold it, and my sister's in that business, so I come from that kind of mentality or background of like, do it yourself, so that probably seems a lot more natural to me. So
Yeah, well, I would think so, because if you're around entrepreneurial parents, you hear things and it just starts happening through osmosis.
yeah, and even in college when I was taking classes, I would do a little bit more, like I wanted to be in galleries, so I tried to get in and failed, and so then I found a way to have my own art show. So I found a venue, I did my own advertising, I wrote press releases and got slides made, and I don't think a lot of the other students were doing that, but I think it just seemed like, oh, that's what you do. That's how you make things happen.
Hope you got an A.
I did, actually. I don't know if I'm allowed to say it, but the teacher said that since I was doing that, he would give me an A for the class. But I was also doing everything I needed to do for the workshop, or not the workshop, the class I was taking. So I liked art, so doing anything for a class was a good thing.
I think that I grew up, my dad was an entrepreneur, still is, at almost 90. And I grew up watching him start businesses and take risks. And so I just naturally do that. And I think that you're probably doing the same thing, in the sense that a lot of people who don't grow up with that are afraid to take that leap and start their own business. And you have an art gallery.
I do, yeah. That was a scary thing to do because I had been working out of my house, and there's safety in that because you're not worried about the expense of paying rent. But it's also hard because you're hoping the galleries see in you what you see in yourself, and when you're new and starting, that's not always the case. So I was doing what I could to participate with the magazines and do advertising, but I also found that, okay, maybe since I don't really have a good representation in Scottsdale, I can have my own place, and it would also be where I could go work, because at that time I was working in my dining room and it wasn't ideal. So I found a space on Main Street, so I had relevant foot traffic, a good location, the rent was reasonable, and started painting in there. And I think the quality of the quality of my work really went up because I had nothing else to do but paint. It wasn't like I could go wash dishes or hang out in my bedroom or goof off. Like, there really wasn't anything else than painting, and it made my work look better and more finished and more focused.
So you took the distractions away, because when you're at home you could have an excuse to
do pretty much anything else.
Right.
Wake up late. There are people that you get visiting the gallery, but it's kind of like, it's relevant distractions. They're coming to look at art, or they're interested in what you're doing, or they're here to buy, which is always good. And it's not constant, so I still found that easier.
You used a term, you just mentioned relevant.
Yeah.
You said relevant foot traffic. I've never heard that term. I'm a marketing guy, but I like it.
I thought that was the best tip I ever got from a friend.
Tell us about it.
I was talking about, he had opened his own gallery and studio, and he was saying, you got to do this, like so-and-so did this, and he's super successful too now, and you got to do it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, how do you make rent? And then da-da-da. And then one of the things he told me is, make sure when you get a place, you get something with relevant foot traffic, which was good because it really helped narrowing it down. Because, I remember there was this one spot in Phoenix that was like right next to a coffee shop that I liked. It was kind of a cool space. It was downtown. There was probably only offices and a school around it, but I'm like, oh, that'd be great. I'll just paint and go get coffee. It'll be fun. But I wouldn't have sold anything.
Right.
I would have
no
liked
art buyers,
there was no one going there to buy art. No one knew who I was. So going to Scottsdale, it was kind of like, you didn't really have to, have a name because you had it on the building, and that kind of just made people think, whoa, she's somebody. She has her name on a sign. and adore. And so then they'd come in, they're like, oh, I like this work, let's buy it. So.
And relevant is all about all the people on the street are
Yeah.
shopping for art.
People come to Main Street in Scottsdale to buy art. Like that, it's an art hub. Like there's the Scottsdale Artist School, I teach down the street. You got students who are able to visit you. You have art buyers visiting you. You have your local community who want just to have like an artistic outing. So you get all of that on this one street, and I probably wouldn't have had it if I just opened it up in an office building or something like that. So.
Well, let's back up and talk about how this all began. You're very successful for your age, I believe.
Oh, thank you.
And you're still very young. And how long have you been painting?
I have been painting since I can remember. So yeah, I don't have a time when I could say, when I was 10 years old, I discovered art. It was very innate. Not to say that I was doing a great job, but I think it relaxed me, or it was a way for me to focus. So, you know, school and homework papers and free time was pretty much spent drawing or doodling, and it was also my identity growing up as I was the artist. So I don't think I was planning to be an artist when I grew up, but it was definitely what I was going to be because it was all I did. I didn't really think of it that way. It was like, oh, I breathe and I walk and I draw. So yeah, I ended up.
So was there a time when all of a sudden it clicked that said, all right, I need to get some really good instruction, or are you completely self-taught? What's that story?
No. I don't think, I could say self-motivated. I think to say self-taught is like, I got a lot of great, painting tips from people I've taken workshops from. And I started going to the Scottsdale Artist School when I was 16. So I think Bob Shoefly was my first teacher, and I was like diehard pencil artist. So I took his class, and then I kind of moved on to, I took a lot of classes from Joseph Mendez and Scott Christensen, and I had really good instruction from them, and I learned so much. So I can't really say I learned those all on my own.
Oh, well, how fortunate to live in a place with such a great school.
I'm very lucky. So I was able to kind of go there, and that's how I spent like spring breaks in high school and college, was going back to take a workshop, or I might take time off of school for a class. So, but yeah, I think then I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to go to college. And at first I thought I was going to be like, I was still young, so I had this romantic notion I was going to be like Egyptologist. Like, that sounds exciting. And then
I found Egyptologist.
I was, when you're young, you have all these ideas like, this is what I'm going to be. And it's not, I don't think it was that realistic for me, because I took those classes. And first off, I'm going to the University of Arizona, which it's a good college, but I don't know if that's the school for Egyptology. I didn't really do my homework. So I took a class, and then the instructor was very good, and he basically laid out the reality of what you were probably going to be doing, which was paperwork and massive amounts of studying you have to do to find out if there was even a dig you could do, then find the funding. And I'd probably just be digging up pottery off of, the freeway in Tucson. I was no, I'm going to be an art major.
Sounds very exotic until you actually stop and think
like,
about it. Okay, I'm just
right off
spend my whole life
I think it's the
dusting
I-10,
dirt.
digging for pots. So yeah, then I went in full-time art major after that. So yeah, that was like my turning point.
And when did you become a professional? When did you first sell your first painting?
First painting. Well, I mean, I sold a painting to like a hairdresser when I was in high school. I don't know if that counts, but
Sure.
I went to work out of college. It was like, you got to get a job, and it's like, okay. So I went to work at like one of those places that make lots of art, and you'll probably find them in your hotels or Z Gallery or Ethan Allen. So I was one of the artists that worked there, and I did good, and I thought it was a great place to be if you wanted to kind of have a steady paycheck as an artist or have insurance, but at the same time you weren't really able to just go off and do your own thing.
So is this like a company that creates things that go in those stores?
Basically. And you could also be a private buyer that would buy stuff, but you made a lot of work and you sold it, and it was nice, but like I think it wasn't really what I wanted to do. And there was a lot of artists, I think, in that facility that wanted to be able to like break out on their own and be an artist for themselves. So I quit.
So they were telling you what to paint?
In a way, they would give you direction. I mean, I had some creativity, but you know, there was like, okay, this is the style we need you to work with, because we don't, like, I could do figures, so they didn't have someone that could do that. And so if you could draw, that was a valuable thing. So I had my niche, and it was fun. I liked it. I always thought that, okay, if art fails, like, this is a thing to go back to, because at least I can, you know, still do art. But I have a lot more fun discovering who I am as an artist outside of it, because I have more places to go and better quality of materials. I can use oil paints and, you know, be a landscape painter, I guess.
So is that what you consider yourself? A
I'm
landscape
kind of, yeah.
painter?
I mean, I like figures in it every now and then. I don't think I'll ever be like a figure painter or a portrait painter. I try, and I always think they look goofy. But I do like it when I'm able to have like a figure incorporated into a landscape.
Well, you do those beautifully.
Yeah, those are kind of fun.
If you look at your website, you've got a lot of them. You've got some horses.
Yeah. And I like to get to know the people I paint, so they're all, I know them. And so it's weird because sometimes they're the ones who buy those paintings, and I feel bad because I don't want them to think that the purpose of me painting it was to make money off of them. So I do try to do thank yous, like I'll give them a book or a print or something like that. But it's fun to get to know them because a lot of them, you know, work at the Canyon, and it's hard when they move on and, you know, find a job at a different park, and I don't get to see them when I go up. But
well, you do a lot of Grand Canyon paintings.
I love it.
How did this passion for the Grand Canyon happen?
You know, I think it's a combination of things. There was, you know, you always, you know, when you're starting out painting, there's always like the advice someone might give you, like, you don't want to paint the canyon, it's too hard, don't do it, don't go. And so I think I have a little bit of a rebellious quality that says, oh, don't go paint that. Well, it's exactly what I want to do. So I was coming back from painting at Monument Valley in Canyon de Chelly, and there was a turnoff to the North Rim. I think it was in October, so took the turnoff and drove to the North Rim, which was, you know, from there, like maybe a 4-hour drive. And it was the end of the season, the last night the park was open, and got very lucky and got a really good hotel room. And I got to paint there for, you know, that one night, and I thought it was really great. I got some not that good pictures because back then I was still using 35 millimeter.
Right.
The dark days of plein air painting, when, you know, you get your photo reference material and you had no idea what you were taking pictures of. You just snap, 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 and then like you get home, and then you'd have it developed on the dark side and on the light side and on the medium side. And like, I got 2 photos from 4 rolls of film. So then it's like, well, I got to go back, get more material. And so went back, kept going back, and then I saw like it was a Clark Hollings painting of the mule train going down a snowy trail at the canyon. And I didn't know enough about the canyon to have an idea of where the trail was. I thought it was the Bright Angel Trail at the South Rim, so I would stalk it out and get there and just wait for the mules to come up. And I was like, any minute now. And I'd have to do it in winter because his painting was in the snow. And so I would like freeze and stand there and waiting for those mules. And eventually I started to get to know the people who worked with the trail crew in the national park. And they, you know, also really great people. And I think there was one that's like, you know, if you just, you know, because I think I was sitting in a snowdrift once for like a couple of hours. Oh. And I pulled the car mat out of the car seat to sit on because I wanted to get a picture of them going across the train tracks. And he's like, you know, we'll just give you our number and you can call me so that you don't have to wait so long. And then...
Well, that's nice.
But yeah, I ended up finding out that it was never Bright Angel Trailhead. It was a Kaibab Trail that they had come up. But I just didn't know the canyon well enough back then, so...
Well, tell me about photography. You use a lot of photography?
I do. I appreciate a good digital camera. I currently use a Canon Digital Rebel, and probably on my 3rd one because I bang them up quite a bit. The iPhones or the camera phones are getting better, so I've been kind of using both of them because the iPhone can kind of get a better balance of light and dark than I think my digital can, maybe because I don't know how to properly use it.
Well, the iPhone has HDR in it.
Yes, I do like that.
Which basically, for people
evens
who
it out.
don't know, you're either getting exposure for the sky or exposure for the land, and so it takes multiple exposures and then combines them.
So yeah, that's very handy. So I'll get the detail from the digital and then the nice color balance from the phone. And I think when you bring the study home from painting outside, you get like, the more information, the better for me. So I have this digital image that I can use as a drawing reference, and then I have my plein air sketch to use as a color study. And also just the whole like vibe of when you're there, you can't really get from a photo alone. Like it's a little
Glad
sterile.
to hear you say that. So, and I think that's an important distinction, because painting from photographs alone without having the experience of painting outdoors and really being able to capture the light, because photographs lie, right? They
do.
They distort
It'd be nice
things.
if they didn't.
They make the shadows darker. The colors are not often as vibrant.
And it's a world in a little box, like, or whatever screen you're using from. There's no spirit of the place in a photo. It's just flat, so you can't really feel like what inspired you to paint it was what you felt when you were actually there on location, not the photograph.
Right.
But
so you try to do a plein air study when you go out first.
I mean, I'm sure there's some exception somewhere, but if I'm painting something, I painted it in person. So I don't really, and if I can feel like if I've been in the studio too long and I haven't been outside, you just get that staleness that creeps in. It's like you got to go back there.
So a lot of people viewing this might not have ever experienced plein air painting.
Yeah.
Tell me about the first time you actually took it outdoors.
That's a good one. It was definitely, that was in a Joseph Mendez class. And I was still like just, finishing up being at the art group, and I was like die-hard photo. I'm like, you don't need to paint outside. I have these, crappy photos to work from, and they're the truth. Because like I didn't know, it looked like the truth to me. And so I came into this like class. It was a workshop at the Scottsdale Art School, and I had my photograph there, and then I had like something very similar in front of me, and then he had come up and he pointed out like, do you really think it's this black? And then he's like, look at this still life, and look at the difference between the still life and this photo you have. And first, I'm sure I've heard it before, but for some reason it really clicked, and I was like, oh crap, yeah, it's completely different. Like that still life is not black. And it was a light bulb, and I got myself like out there. Not right away. I took the Ray Roberts class, and that was a plein air painting class, and that was my first one, and I was very ill prepared. I came out with I think a halter top so I could get some color. I had a rainbow umbrella, which made all sorts of awful colors. And
projected different colors.
Yeah, and then you're very nervous because like anything that approached you, you were sure was going to critique what you were doing. And I was probably pretty bad because I haven't painted outside before. So it's like focusing.
What would you tell people who have not done plein air painting? What would you tell them to do, and what's your step-by-step recommendation?
I think I don't know if I would say courage or just accepting that, the first times you go out there, it's intimidating and it's normal, and we're all going to kind of go through it. It's okay, and you can go with a group if you want, if it makes you feel better. Sometimes that was easier for me. Like taking the workshop, I think, made it a little braver because you're with other people who are similar. And I know that even with that, I have had students who are afraid of taking plein air workshops because they don't think they're good enough. And so many workshops, I think, or painting outside is tailored for your level. Like you do what you can, and even if all you do is get out there, set your work up and do a little sketch, like that's great. You made a first step, and then maybe you go a little bit further next time.
Well, you would probably recommend to someone that they should learn painting before they actually go out and try to do painting.
Well, yeah, you can work on, most of what I did before that was, still lifes, and I did a lot of photography work, but you can paint just like, a simple apple, or, an apple maybe in one painting and a plant in another can be many other things in the landscape. Like maybe it's a red door when you're outside, but you'll learn just as much from those, the little objects.
Yeah, well, there's so much information. I was with Joe McGurl, and he said, I can paint figures in my sleep. He said, landscapes are tough because you're really doing hundreds of little still lifes, with all the shapes and all the trees and all the reflections and all the water and all.
If you make that branch a little off, nobody's going to know. That's true.
Yeah.
Like the eye, just a little bit off of the eye, and it's like, oh, they look goofy.
Goofy. Well, I think that I think it's an interesting thing for people to go out and get the opportunity to paint.
It's scary,
on
but it's so
location.
worth it, and it's so much fun. Once you get over that initial fear, like yes, have some experience under you, like get a good setup, get comfortable with the paint. You know, take a workshop if you need to, but it's so worth it when you get out there because it just makes your work better. It's more true. Your colors will be better. You'll be happier.
Yeah, I think it's great advice for people because, you know, the great art schools in Russia, for instance, which are probably the best in the world, they teach figurative art, they teach anatomy, but they also teach plein air painting because they say that you really can't learn how to paint unless you get the real sense of color, and you can't get that from a photograph.
Can't. I mean, yeah, it'd be nice if you could, but you can't. And you know, it probably wouldn't be nice because then you'd miss all the fun and the adventure of painting from life. Even if you do a bad job, it's still fun. Well,
for me, I can't speak for you, but I think that plein air painting for me, and I call it the new golf because I think it's challenging.
It's a workout.
It's a chance to be outside, a chance to hike in a little bit. You're still getting your creative juices flowing, and then, you know, some of us get lucky and have the ability to sell our paintings, which even makes it even better. But I just love going outside, and you know, I'm not a sports guy. I don't want to hike, you know, hundreds of miles, but I like to be able to pull up the car to the side of the road and set up and be in a beautiful place.
Sometimes I think if it wasn't for painting, like me by nature would not be like, let's go camping, let's go hiking. But if it involves a good painting, like I'm all in.
So do you camp?
Yeah, I camped. So I think, well, I was very excited during the last show I was at. I got to hike into the canyon a bit, so that was exciting. I was very proud of myself because art supplies are heavy. When we did a river rafting trip in the canyon with some friends of mine, and that was all camping for about 10 days, and that was tricky because the terrain was not, you know, your friend.
Right.
But
well, and your stuff's getting wet probably, and
the stuff stayed dry pretty well. They were able to tarp it up, but I think sand was the bigger problem. Sand was the bane of your existence down there.
I've never done the Grand Canyon trip.
It's fun. I think hiking it though is easier than rafting it. But that's my opinion.
Yeah, but the other people are cooking all the food for you, right?
Yeah, but you gotta haul that stuff off the boat and on the boat every day.
Oh.
That's like, you get like a group of artists who have like 2 bags per person. There's always someone who carries way too much stuff.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter what bag you bring, you're responsible for everybody's stuff. So everyone unloads everything, everyone loads everything back up every day. So you're like, oh, it was a lot of work.
So there are people who will say painting is more than just representing what you see. What is painting to you?
Well, like, I think for me, it's like, it's the challenge of trying to represent what I see, like my version of what I see. It doesn't have to be verbatim, but it's like an interesting color interaction, or maybe there was the atmosphere or like a challenging view that you didn't know if you could quite get. I also think that what makes artists different than just, you know, a photographer is that we have the luxury of kind of editing it in a way they can't. Like, you have this wonderful ability to kind of, you know, play your own form of God with what you see and invent it a bit. You know, you want to be true to your subject, but you can shift that tree, or maybe you want that sky to be a little bit of a different color. Like, we have that creative license, and that's a wonderful thing you can do with painting.
Right. Well, and that's the point, isn't it? You're trying to do painting, a piece of art. You're not necessarily trying to
be literal.
Be literal.
And it's like that flash of a, you know, I think it's like you're capturing, like when the regular viewer like would say, let's come to the canyon and look, they'll look, but maybe they don't really look. Maybe what you're painting is what they take home in their mind's eye, like that's the painting you have. It's like that moment when you looked at it and maybe turned away and you missed something.
Right.
I think as artists we try to capture that little brief moment.
Well, and we also get the opportunity to sit and stare at something for a few hours.
Which is awesome.
Yeah.
It's surprising how much you miss when you don't do that.
Yeah.
So life just kind of goes by and you're like, ooh, look at that, look at that. Look at that
Right.
light right now.
There's a scene in the movie Vacation with Chevy Chase where they drive all the way across country to go to the Grand Canyon.
Yeah.
And they get there and they go, and then they leave, right?
That's like a lot of visitors there.
Take
It's
a
a
picture.
lot. They don't even sometimes they don't even get up to Tovar. They just stop at the first pullout and head back. And it's like, oh gosh, you're missing so much.
Now, have you been out on the thing the Indian
No, I
reservation did, where you walk out?
I don't think I can do that.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's not a height thing. I'm very comfortable with heights, especially going there so much. But just like, I don't want to paint. I don't even know if it's a place I'd want to paint.
Oh, it's spectacular. I did it. I did it the first week they opened.
Oh, you did?
And
That was expensive then, because I think you paid for everything, like just to walk out.
oh, it's still expensive. Yeah, you know, and then you can't take your camera, take your shoes off. You know, you have to pay for their photograph.
See, I can't do that. I
Yeah,
can't.
but it really is worthwhile because it's really interesting.
I'll just
to
go to
see how,
Toro Weep and stand on the very edge and be like, I got that.
It's different though. There's something about your brain, even though psychologically
Yeah.
you know I'm on something that's stable. When you're able to look down through a glass floor,
Yeah.
you're like, ugh.
It's kind of fun.
Yeah.
But I did have that for the first times I went to the canyon. I did have that. There was this one part that you could walk out on at the North Rim. They've made it safer since, but there was a time when you just walk out and you're like, I don't know about this. You just try to balance. But you get that vertigo. But I've lost a little bit of that. Like, unless I get really close to an edge, I'm pretty good.
So do you feel like the Grand Canyon is your muse?
It's definitely my motivation. I'm like, muse sounds so like romantic, I guess. But yeah, I suppose so. I haven't lost interest yet. There's so many different facets. Like, you can paint the people, you can paint the mules, you can paint, you know, the river scenes or the tree scenes. It's like, it's unlimited, and yet you still get to have a genre. Like, that's great.
I had never painted the Grand Canyon until I took my kids out there a couple of years ago. Mm-hmm. And I used gouache or something because that's what I had. That's what I had with me. But I was blown away by how difficult it was because there's so much information.
There is. It's easy to get lost in like an area, which I'm sure during the video I'll probably have parts where I'm like, where was I again? But you know, the thing that does help is it's almost like so abstract, your brain can't really, you know, for example, like if you paint a tree, you know, you grow up as a kid, you're like, trees are these green circles on brown sticks. Green circle, brown stick, lollipop trees.
Right.
And you know, you have to unlearn that as an artist and paint what it really is maybe a green lumpy thing on a purple stick.
Well, or like clouds. I mean, we you know,
yeah,
clouds are not white.
No, but the canyon kind of like, you don't really go and paint the canyon like, oh, the canyon should look like this, and you're like, I don't know what this relates to. So it's one less thing you have to deal with is, you know, lollipop trees.
Right.
You're like, okay, well, let's just start from scratch. Abstraction. It's like blue patch, orange patch, sky.
Right.
So I like that about the canyon. I think it's...
Well, it's a challenge, and I think, you know, it's so big and there's so many angles. I mean, you could stand in one spot and get 100 paintings. And so I would imagine it's something that is ever challenging.
You just paint, you just pivot the easel as you go.
Right.
You could do that.
Right. So did you have an inspiration, a favorite Grand Canyon painter from the past?
Well, I mean, you know, Bohling's I mentioned definitely got me out there. I mean,
Did you ever meet him?
No, I've never met him. No.
Yeah, he died.
He died
a few
years ago, and I was like, oh, rats. I mean, there's a lot of great canyon painters out there. I'm definitely a fan of Kurt Walters. I mean, he's romantic, but he's not far away from the reality of the canyon, which I like. I kind of like the literal canyon. I don't think I go too fanciful with it, so I like his interpretation of it and how it looks so busy yet not. I don't know. I always thought that was great. You know, Woodforce, I always have a hard time saying. Gunnar Woodforce is like super cool. I like the watercolors too. I used to do that a lot more, and so his stuff is really fun to see.
Now you do watercolors as well, don't you?
Yeah, mostly for studies. Like if I can't, I enjoy doing them for fun because it's like, it's my way of like, I don't want it to be work. I love doing them. It's enjoyable. I can take them on trips and just, you know, take my little notebook out and just paint. And if it doesn't work out, I'm okay with that. If it looks great, I'm excited. But I like that they're low pressure and it's just where I get to be creative and enjoy myself. So, I mean, I don't know if I want to make a big watercolor again. Maybe I'll change my mind. I don't know.
How big have you done? You've done big ones?
When I was starting out, when I first started out, I was just pencil. I took the shoe fly class, and then I kind of went into watercolor, and that's all I did. But so then I would, you know, maybe do 20 by 30s, and I was young, so I was like, how creative can I be with watercolor? I would put saran wrap on things and salt and whatever I could put on it to give different textures. So now I'm a little more simple, and I'm having fun with just like puddling it so that the paint dries interestingly. Yeah, watercolor is about, oil painting is about application, like how you apply the paint to give it texture. It's like what counts. And watercolor, it's how you let it dry. It's like you're just kind of like, okay, what's it going to turn out like? I don't know.
Right.
It's interesting.
Quite frankly, I think watercolor is harder than oil. But that's just, I don't know if that's really
I thought
true.
oil was super high because like I had come from watercolor painting and then to go into oil painting because it was so flip-flop.
Well, I had a similar reaction
easy.
in that, you know, watercolor is kind of where we all start out as kids.
Yeah.
And so we're a little more comfortable with it. But the one thing I realized about good watercolorists is they have to think about 50 steps ahead.
They do.
And
you have to plot out because the
know,
water, you got to do everything before it dries. Otherwise, you get that worked paper look, and that's not good.
Right. And with oil paint, if you mess it up, you just cover it.
That is a luxury.
So for somebody who might be viewing this, who is just kind of getting into this and wanting to learn how to paint, what advice do you give them? What advice do you give your students?
I think products are important. I mean, I think just from my students in the past, there's a lot of this feeling like, well, because I'm new, I need to buy cheap supplies. And the problem with that is you're not going to get good results. Like your red and blue will probably make brown. So that's the first thing you need to do. You're not going to feel successful if you can't properly mix a color. And I think you want to start off on a right foot. So, taking a good beginning class or understanding the basics, like maybe keep your palette simple. Don't go too crazy. Understand how paints work, how it mixes. Just have fun. Understand what the things you can do. Understand shadows and lights, drawing. Go through some basic steps so that you can, be successful. Don't try to bite off more than you can chew. Like if you haven't painted the Grand Canyon before, maybe that's not where you start. Do something simple and then feel good about that, and then maybe move on to something harder and feel good about that and then move on. So I think for myself, I definitely took things in baby steps. I felt good about my values before I started breaking into color. So, I think what I like to go through is just painting is hard enough as it is, so make the process simpler. Like give yourself more prep work so that you are more successful. Like
think, Amy, think.
I'm blanking.
It's all right. So
I'm probably gonna talk it all about I do the sketch and then I do, I'll do a study and then I'll kind of sketch it out on the canvas. I'll pre-mix some colors because that takes one less thing out of the process when I'm painting. And then, I try not to have to juggle too many things at once.
Okay, so I'm sure you'll talk about that in the instructional, but essentially you'll make a pile of different colors that you're seeing.
The main piles, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I like to work with a gray palette or a neutral palette. I mean, it doesn't have to be gray, but I try to avoid white because for me, it's a lot easier to judge color on something neutral because your painting in the end, if we were to take all the colors and mix them together, would be a neutral mud.
Well, plus when you're outdoors, white blows out your eyes.
It does. It is really hard to see. So I'll even tone my canvas down. I mean, not everyone does that, and for a while I didn't, but I find I do better if it's toned. And so my goal is to find out what makes it easier for me to paint. Like, what am I going to have success with? What am I not going to have success with? Like, which colors perform for me when I need them to? Which are the brushes that are going to perform for me? What is the subject matter I'm going to work with? Like, I'll do the sketches beforehand so that I know if it's even going to work out.
Well, also helps you define, you know, when you're outdoors, there's so much information, you're glancing around, next thing you
You're
know,
summing it up.
things that are on the outside all of a sudden start creeping in, and
Yeah.
it's nice to have that drawing to know.
That is the hard
This
thing.
is my edge.
It's 360-degree view. It's like all the way around, and like it's hard to like bring everything in. And you'll see students that get out there and they just paint the whole canyon, and it's like you gotta find your view and then like stick with this view. So the little sketch is a lot easier for us to come up with an idea on something that's small, and then get the shape out. Okay, now I can work out with size. Am it gonna be a vertical? Is it gonna be a square? And then, okay, well this is a terrible sketch. Maybe I need to redo it or do a different subject. You know, you learn a lot about it doing those things. And
Yeah, well, you know, when you're doing a sketch, you have something in your head, and then when you try to do the sketch, sometimes it just doesn't
you're
work.
like, well, that's not a.
Yeah, that's
You might discover something that's like, well, this is a flaw in this painting, like.
right.
Or you'll note like, okay, what's going to happen with the light in this subject? How long am I going to have it for? Like, when do I need to really bust it out? And when do I need to slow down?
Better to get it done first, early.
Sketches
so you
help
can- yeah,
because
they
you
really
got
do.
the value study there, so you kind of know where the shadows are.
So you're very young and you have a lot of opportunity ahead of you. What's the big goal for you? What are the big things that you kind of dream of doing that you want to kind of check off your bucket list one day?
Bucket list. I think career-wise, you know, I think when I first started out, they were more grandiose, and now it's just like you realize how much you really need in life to be content. And I think the big goal for me is just to keep painting. I think anyone who's an artist and is painting full-time is a success, and to be able to keep doing what I do is a wonderful thing. So long-term goal is just to do what I do, not have to retire and just paint. There's definitely a lot of places I want to paint.
Like?
Well, okay, so my future trip I hope to go on is Chiapas, so that sounds very exciting.
Isn't that the other bigger canyon?
They do have the big, the Grand Canyon of Mexico is somewhere down there.
Yeah.
But I think just like the people, like Mexico, I'll go and paint there sometimes, and it's a beautiful place. It's like to go to like somewhere like San Miguel de Allende, it's like, it feels the Grand Canyon to me because there's so much detail and color saturation and, you know, yellow ochres and reds. So
Where else would you like to go to paint?
I could go back to Italy because I think there's some pretty buildings there. We just went to Croatia over the summer,
nice.
and that was exciting because, yeah, it's like a lot of stone walls. I mean, definitely I'm pretty happy with the canyon, so I can always go back there, and I will always go back there. It's like an endless source of. I haven't been to Toroweeb yet. I want to go see that. It's
Toroweeb?
Yeah, that's another look. It's on the east side.
Oh.
No, the west side.
East,
Sorry.
west.
It's on
who
the
knows?
west side of the canyon.
All right.
It'd be also, you know, maybe one day I'll have a painting in the Grand Canyon. That would be cool. I mean, I have it at the studio every now and then, but.
You mean their studio? They have an artist residency program?
No, but sometimes they acquire artwork, so that would be pretty cool. If you're a
Oh.
Grand Canyon painter and the Grand Canyon has a piece of your work, that's also pretty cool. One
Yeah,
day.
you know, if you go into the, what's the name of the old hotel in the
There's
Grand
El
Canyon?
Tovar. Yeah, I have some friends in there. I'm like, hey, guys.
Well, there's some beautiful
They have some
historic
very- yeah,
paintings
they
in the
do.
lobby there. I think
And they
they've
also
got
have like
I think
these.
they have a Keith painting.
They have some portables there too, which have an impressive art collection, but you have to find your way to go see them. So they have some really great works there. So it's cool. It's fun to see.
Do you collect any other artists' works?
Well, not much, but I do have some other works. I'm very proud of the few I have. It's very exciting. So I have like a watercolor from a teacher I had in college who passed away, but it's a really pretty watercolor.
Oh, that's very special then.
Yeah, it was. So I went to go see him before I went to that school to check out the art department, but he was a neat guy. I have a painting by Susan Lyon, so I took her workshop recently because it's still good to always take classes if you can, just to mix things up. But it was this little sketch of a girl, and I just thought she was so pretty. And I really am attracted to work that when I look at it, I think of like, okay, what can I learn from this? Like, how did she do that? Look at how subtle this stroke was to make the eye that isn't, you know, it's not literal, but it's just so nice and it feels literal.
Do you find yourself going to museums when you travel and checking out the artwork and
Oh yeah,
studying
I
the
do
artwork?
like museum visits. I don't really see everything, and I'm not like the slow museum goer. I'll kind of get to the section I really like, and then I'm just hooked. Like Sargent paintings, Sorolla paintings, like I really want those sections because I feel like it's more like the stuff that inspires me. So like the Spanish Historical Society is, you just kind of want to touch it and take pictures.
The Sorollas, you mean in New York at the Hispanic Society?
Yes,
Yeah,
that was a
all
great
the
museum.
Sorolla paintings.
So it was wonderful when I was in Paris. We went to Giverny and they happened to have him there. Oh no, it was Zorn. Is it Zorn or Sorolla? Gosh, I should know this. But they were there for the exhibit and I just thought it was awesome.
A couple of years ago, we took the Fine Art Connoisseur Art Cruise in Spain. And
So you got to see like...
it turned out, just by luck of the draw, there were 5 different Sorolla shows in different cities. So we got to just see all this great Sorolla work.
Yeah,
there was
those are
one
when
called
you-
Sorolla and the Sea, and then there was the big show that
His stuff was
traveled
great.
from San Diego and other places, and they had paintings in that
Was that's that one show they made the book out of, right?
Yes.
Oh yes, that was great.
and they had paintings in
It's a good
that
show.
that did not come to the U.S. show because they were from Cuba, and there's
Yeah.
this trade embargo thing. So we got to see the Cuban paintings, and there was it was just like a Sorolla Fest. It was wonderful.
Those are
then
hard,
we
like-
went to his house. And
Oh, that would have been fun. Yeah, and you can't like, it's hard to buy the books for those things because then you see them in person and then you're like, I can't buy this book. I'm going to forget what it really looked like. But they did a good book for that show when it's
Yeah.
like spot on. So
yeah, the problem is taking all these heavy art books, and when you're traveling, you spend a lot of money
yeah.
getting them home.
Well, I got mine online. I paid a lot for it, I guess. Like someone was like, oh, if you get over here, it's like half the price. I was like, darn it.
Well, I think that's important for students to understand that the more they can surround themselves with art,
Yeah.
the more
And
they
no,
can
the art books are not
study.
always the correct colors.
No, they're
Those are
usually
scary
not.
days when you get to the museum. Like, wait, like that. There was a Sorolla painting where the women are working on the sail, and I thought it was a yellow gold painting. And I remember trying to paint it, and I saw it in person. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is completely different. The book had all the wrong colors, and
Right.
that was like, oh my gosh, that was hard. Those light bulb moments.
So, of all the historic painters that you love, which one would you want to have dinner with, and what would you ask them?
Yeah, Sorolla is definitely up there. Like, ask him. Ooh, no, Sargent. Oh my gosh. His watercolors of Venice were stunning. Or just some of those things.
There's a new.
Can I have dinner with both of them?
Yeah, you together.
Okay,
there's
that would work.
There's a new Sargent watercolor show coming up. I just had tea in London with Sargent's grandnephew.
I would like to be Sargent's granddaughter. That would be pretty cool. It's a good last name. But yeah, they would be so fun. That LA show of his work was like really exciting to see. Like how he would just play so neutral and then have like a shock of purple as a fan. It would be like, whoa, how do you do that?
Right.
And like, I don't even know what question I would ask because I feel like I just wouldn't know. Like they're so out of my league, I would be asking the wrong one. I could say, what's your color palette? Or how do you, like, I always marveled at how like Sargent could, have just a wall of like, I'm not very good at this. It's just nothing. Like it would just be a blank, simple, like, color washed in wall, but it would look exciting. I have this urge that I need to fill up every corner. So canyons work for me because it's just like detail everywhere. So I can just detail, like noodle around to death and it works. And they're so good at like, I think because they're so different from me, I want that, like that just clean. The negative space is awesome. That simple negative space, is that how I would phrase it? Just like that wash of color.
Right.
And that still looks like all sorts of stuff are happening. Like, how do you do that? How do you let those things happen?
Well, it sounds to me like you're very passionate. You're still growing. You're still experimenting. And what's the big painting like the one you want to most be remembered for that you haven't done yet?
It would be a canyon scene. I think something that would be like my ideal day if I went out there. It would be like maybe just before, just after a storm, when you get like that kind of spotlight mood lighting, maybe a little snow in there, and maybe some of that cloud inversion, like that kind of day. And then it would be just a big piece.
How big?
I'm not really good at footage. I think the biggest I've done was like 60 inches across, so like bigger than that, a couple feet. Something that could be like, maybe like, wouldn't it be fun to do something like, well, I probably would get there and say 15 feet, but I could do 10 feet. I think I'd need a new easel, like 10 feet by like
I'll tell you what, if you
6 feet.
You do a 10-footer, I'll buy you a new easel.
I got myself a Hughes easel, which is like brilliant. Like I won a prize, and the first thing I did was I bought that easel. And it's like, I don't know if it's the right term, but it's like the one prong. So it's the smallest one that goes in all the different directions. But like, now I'm like, why didn't I get one with 2 of them? Because I didn't think I would ever go bigger than back then I thought a 16 by 20 was like giant, and now like,
well, maybe somebody
bigger.
Watching this will commission you to do a 10-foot painting.
You know what? I'm going to do it anyway. Probably. I have some work to do. So once I get those like commissions done, I'm going to be cranking out a big one.
Well, one of the things that when I teach marketing, one of the things I tell all artists is that you need to paint bigger.
Yeah.
Because most of the paintings in museums are bigger. And
everyone has these walls that are just huge, and they don't know what to do with them. And they don't want like 20 little pieces all over it. So.
Right, and nobody's ever going to throw out a 10-foot painting.
It's fun too, because when you do the big paintings, I had another teacher mention this once, and I'm like, that's so true. Like the bigger the painting is, like when you're the artist and you're painting it, you kind of feel like you're in it. You're in the middle of it. It feels like you're there. And that's something that a large painting brings to you, is a little one, they're gems, but the big ones, it's like, I could be here, if I get up like right like that close enough.
I haven't done it myself, but one day I'm going to do the 10-foot painting. I bought a 10-foot roll of canvas. I go to stretch it.
Is there like a 10-foot challenge that Facebook does? We can do like ice bucket challenge. Can we do the 10-foot?
What a great idea! We'll do the 10-foot challenge.
Months later, it'd be the slowest challenge ever because it takes so long to do every painting. Results would be like, okay, next year.
6 months later. Yeah.
6 months later, I finished.
So you're young, but how do you want to be remembered? In terms of when the history books are written and when people are talking about you long after you're gone, what do you hope they say about you as an artist?
Like the artist's artist. Yeah, that's the place to be. Like it's not so much that, you were the most popular, you were like whatever, but to have your peers look at you and say like, oh, she was a good painter. She knew what she was doing. She was artist. And I don't think I'm there, but who doesn't want to, I don't want to be looked at as like, oh, she sold out, she did all this, and I'm like, yeah, there's a balance to all that things, you got to find a balance, but to know like the artist thought you were a good painter.
Well, and isn't that always
nice.
When you're in a show, at the Artist Choice Award, the consumers never pick the painting that is the one that would be the Artist's Choice.
That's why you say the artist.
But when you're the Artist's Choice Award, that's a really big accomplishment.
That's always something that I was interested in. I think when it comes to judging shows, like sometimes I think that the truest award is the Artist's Choice Award. Because sometimes when it comes to People's Choice, sometimes someone might have a giant group of friends that come. So it's hard to tell. Like sometimes it's genuine, sometimes you just never know. But like when the artists are voting, it is a different situation because they're like, I know how this person works. They know that artist. They know what they do. They can appreciate, the subtle strokes they did and the decisions they made in their painting from a different point of view. That you're like, oh, I bought a painting at the Grand Canyon show, and that was my favorite piece of the event. And I don't know if anyone else liked it, but I marveled at the way it was. Bob Delegowski, so he did a watercolor from inside the canyon, and like the way he did the dry brush and he used the watercolor medium was like fascinating.
Well, this has been fascinating. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
Well, that was Amery Bohling painting the Grand Canyon, and you can learn more about it at lilyartvideo.com. finartcancer.com. Remember, in the comments section, you'll find a special discount code for today only. Thank you for watching.
For generations, the great painters have known that there are certain subject matter which really show off their skills as a painter. Some subjects are so complex and complicated, yet when people see paintings of these subjects, they realize just how good these painters really are. One of the most complex and hard-to-paint subjects is the Grand Canyon, with its vast expanse, its subtle color shifts, and complex geology. Artists throughout history have made the pilgrimage to the Grand Canyon, the master of all landscape subjects, knowing it's an important subject to prove their ability as a painter. Now you can make the pilgrimage in your own home, so you can discover exactly how to take a complex subject like the Grand Canyon and simplify it to create the effective complexity without having to suffer over every little detail. Arizona-based artist Amery Bohling has spent years studying and painting the Grand Canyon and has produced some amazing paintings of the canyon, which are highly sought after by her collectors. Now, she reveals what she has learned from months of study over years of painting the canyon.
I just finished shooting a new instructional video about painting the Grand Canyon. And in it, we're going to go over a lot of stuff that I think is going to help you learn as an artist. We do no-tans, we're going to go through sketches like this guy. This is going to be your main tool, along with a good reference material. I'm going to go through the brushes I use, the paints I use, how I mix things, how I sketch things, and how to know when to finish your paintings. That's always a big question. I really hope you get a chance to check it out. I think you're going to learn a lot.
This is a must for every painter, offering you skills which apply to all landscape painting, but especially to mountains, rocks, and distant vistas. Over 4 hours of top-tier instruction, which you can paint along with at your own pace. This is a must-have video for the library of any artist who wants to paint amazing mountain landscapes. How to Paint the Grand Canyon with Amery Bohling, now available on DVD and streaming video. Order yours today.